The movie begins with a lifeguard named Josh being woken up by his friend and colleague Rory after a night of drinking. Rory reminds him that it's his turn to set up the buoy, but after assessing Josh's condition, he decides to do it himself. Before leaving, he tells Josh that Tina is waiting for him on the beach. Josh then heads off to meet his fiancée, who also happens to be Rory's sister. While they are discussing their plans, a man suddenly disappears underwater and drowns. The lifeguard on the watchtower warns the beachgoers about the danger and orders them to get out of the water immediately. Josh jumps on a jet ski and speeds toward Rory, who is unaware of the imminent danger. A great white shark attacks Rory from below, breaking his surfboard into pieces and throwing him into the water. Josh grabs his friend's arm and tries to pull him onto the jet ski, but the shark suddenly leaps out and drags Rory underwater, leaving Josh with nothing but his friend's medallion. A year later, Josh listens to the news about the increasing threat of shark attacks as they follow migrating fish closer to the beaches. Pouring himself a cup of coffee, he looks at the engagement ring and a picture of Tina on the wall before heading to work. On his way, he notices strange animal behavior. His neighbor's dog is whining and birds are flying away from the shore. However, he doesn't pay much attention to it and arrives at the supermarket where he works. Meanwhile, a security guard spots a shoplifter named Jamie, and in the underground parking lot, a guy named Kyle parks his car and kisses his girlfriend. Jamie notices the security guard and quickly hides in the staff room, as her boyfriend, Ryan, also works at the supermarket. Ryan greets her on their anniversary and gives her a gift, to which she jokingly responds by giving him a pair of stolen sunglasses. Ryan is visibly upset and tells her to return them. At that moment, the store owner Jessup arrives. He fires Ryan and informs Jamie that the cops are already on their way to get her. In the store, Josh and his colleague Naomi are stocking shelves when he spots his ex-girlfriend in the company of her new boyfriend, Steven. While he stares at them, Jessup shows up and assigns him a new task. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, two robbers are having a conversation in a car, and it's revealed that one of them, named Doyle, is participating in the heist to save his brother. A cop arrives to pick up Jamie, but it turns out to be her father. As a lesson, he decides to arrest her for the day and locks her in the police car. Suddenly, he notices Doyle entering the supermarket with a gun. The officer arms himself and follows him inside. Doyle holds Jessup at gunpoint and demands the money. Jessup tells him the money is stored elsewhere and they go to retrieve it. Jessup tries to ambush the robber and manages to take his gun, but at that moment Doyle's accomplice appears and threatens to kill a store employee if they don't let Doyle go. Meanwhile, Ryan goes to the parking lot and frees Jamie. He tells her that her father is right and reminds her that because of her, he lost his job. Jamie promises to get his job back and heads back into the store. Ryan tries to drive away, but his truck won't start. Josh steps out of the stockroom and witnesses the chaotic failed robbery. The gunman has already killed a girl and is now pointing his weapon at another hostage, threatening to shoot if anyone moves. Suddenly, a massive tsunami wave engulfs the entire city, washing everything away in its path. Josh surfaces and desperately looks around for Tina among the wreckage. Doyle manages to climb onto a store shelf. A moment later, Steven calls out to them while holding an injured cop, Todd. The guys pull Todd up onto the shelf. Steven goes to find a towel. Jamie swims toward her father, and Josh helps her onto the shelf. She happily hugs him. The officer asks how she got out of the car, and Jamie tells him about Ryan. Then it dawns on her. He's still in the parking lot. She tries to rush to him, but Doyle warns her that the parking lot is likely completely flooded, causing Jamie to break down in tears. Josh notices a terrified Tina clinging to one of the shelves and helps her. As they swim back, one of the corpses suddenly disappears underwater. Josh spots the body of Doyle's accomplice while helping Naomi out of the water. It turns out that the parking lot isn't completely flooded. Heather and Kyle are trapped in their car, as is Ryan, who decides to break a window to avoid drowning in his truck and swims to the surface. Meanwhile, Steven, busy looking for towels for Todd, encounters Kirby, who begs for help. He helps the guy climb onto a shelf, then gets out of the water and embraces Tina. Josh watches their reunion. Then he pulls out a metal shard and helps bandage Todd's wounds. Jessup tries to call for help, but his phone isn't working. Josh says he'll stay with Todd while the others should find a way out and bring help. Tina objects, but he refuses to listen. Eventually, she gives in and says that she and Steven will check the main entrance. The pair dives into the water. Doyle suggests checking the loading dock, but no one trusts him, so his assistant, Bub, is sent instead. He swims away. In the parking lot, Kyle yells at Heather for forgetting to charge her phone. She tells him to use his, but his phone is dead too. Meanwhile, Ryan successfully makes it to the cars and climbs out of the water. Josh bends down to wash a wound on his arm, and at that moment, Naomi sees another body disappear underwater. She alerts the others. Josh realizes what's happening and shouts for everyone to get out of the water. Tina and Steven swim toward the shelves, but Bub is suddenly pulled underwater. Stunned, he resurfaces and grabs onto a shelf, desperately reaching out for help. Jamie grabs his hand, but a second later, his body floats away, separated from his arm. Horrified, she drops it, and everyone stares into the water. Doyle spots a shark's fin just before the predator crashes into their shelf. Naomi falls into the water, but the others manage to pull her back up just as a massive 3-meter great white shark swims slowly between the shelves. In the parking lot, Kyle asks Heather for a shoe so he can use the heel to break the window and escape. She protests, saying the shoes cost $300 and that he was the one who gave them to her, so they're too expensive to ruin. Finally, Kyle admits they're fake. In response, Heather simply opens the sunroof, and Kyle realizes how foolish he's been. He climbs onto the roof and looks around when Ryan spots him and tries to get his attention. At that moment, Heather sees a shark and warns Kyle. Seconds later, the predator rams into their car, cracking the driver's side window. The survivors discuss their situation when the supermarket trembles from underground tremors. Exposed electrical wires dangle from the ceiling. They realize they could be electrocuted if they don't turn off the power soon. Josh volunteers, but Tina points out that his wound might attract the shark. Steven then announces that he has a plan and that everyone needs to follow it. In the parking lot, the shark persistently tries to get to Kyle and Heather. Kyle climbs onto the roof and calls for help. Ryan tells him to stay quiet so he can distract the shark while Josh prepares Steven for his task. Steven tells Josh that when Tina went to Singapore, he was the only person she thought about, and she still does. She always said that what happened wasn't Josh's fault. As Tina approaches, the guys fall silent. She asks Josh to promise he'll come back. On this emotional note, he dives into the water. Now, he can reach the electrical panel by moving underwater and breathing through a hose. A shark swims right up to him, but either because he doesn't seem appetizing or because it has other concerns, it passes him by. Steven is almost at the panel when, as always, the hose runs out at the critical moment. Josh tugs on it to signal that Steven is in danger, but the young man heroically discards his makeshift breathing device. He pulls the switch and happily swims to the surface, but in his genius moment, he forgets about the cans strapped to his legs that kept him weighted down. He struggles for a while but eventually drowns, leaving Tina sobbing. Later, Jamie approaches her to offer comfort, while Josh talks to her father. Suddenly, Josh notices a ventilation shaft. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, Ryan lowers his hand into the water to lure the shark. He calls for the others to get out of the car and swim toward his truck. Just as they are nearly there, a wave carries off Heather's dog, and she is unable to help it. In the store, the group finds a rope, but it can only support a small weight. Jessup volunteers to go first. He almost reaches the shaft when a swarm of crabs falls on him, causing him to plummet into the water. The shark instantly lunges and bites off the lower half of his body. Ryan tries to reach an exit through a pipe but slips into the water. Kyle attempts to pull him out but falls in himself. The others try to save him, but the shark is faster. Doyle suggests catching the shark with a hook. He tries to attach it with a rope but fails. When Josh offers to swim down and retrieve the hook, if the others can distract the shark, Todd insists on going instead. His injured leg will only slow them down anyway. Jamie protests, but her father doesn't listen. Determined, she jumps into the water herself and rushes toward the hooks. Grabbing one, she swims back to the shelves and the group pulls her up, leaving the shark empty-mouthed. As Josh secures the rope with the hook, Tina notices her brother's pendant. Josh confesses that he was supposed to die that day, not Rory, who had taken his shift at work. He apologizes, but Tina tells him that he needs to forgive himself. They throw a piece of meat into the water, but the shark swims past indifferently. Then Kirby declares that the only thing that will attract the beast now is live bait. He pulls a gun from his baggy socks and grabs Naomi. It turns out he was Doyle's accomplice, and that Doyle had disguised a corpse with his mask during the chaos. Kirby hooks Naomi's shirt and shoves her into the water. When Josh tries to intervene, Kirby warns him to stay back, but at that moment, Doyle stabs him. However, Josh doesn't drop his weapon. He and Tina help Naomi out of the water and free her from the hook. Then Doyle hooks Kirby's shoulder and throws him in. The shark hungrily snaps up the bait and gets caught on the hook. Meanwhile, Ryan and Heather, still sitting on the truck, suddenly see their dog swimming toward her, defying all odds. Against all expectations, the dog successfully reaches the vehicle. Ryan starts banging on the pipes, hoping to catch the attention of the other survivors. Jamie realizes he's still alive and rushes to help. Todd asks Josh to take care of her. As a farewell, Tina kisses Josh, and he returns her brother's medallion before diving in. Reaching the parking lot, they spot Ryan and Heather, who are shouting for them to get out of the water. At the last moment, they climb onto Todd's truck. Jamie remembers that her father kept a gun in his car. Josh asks her to distract the shark while he retrieves the weapon. Returning to the rooftop, he fires at the creature, but the shots have no effect. Then Josh dives into the water, lets the shark get close, and places the gun right against its jaws. The survivors return to the supermarket, where Doyle prepares to detonate the truck stuck in the main entrance. But suddenly, a second tremor shakes the building, and the shark breaks free from the hook. As it lunges out of the water, Josh shows it who's boss by using a taser on it. Doyle manages to pull the switch, and the explosion clears a path to freedom. Outside, they see a devastated city, with rescue helicopters flying overhead. Somewhere in the ocean, a carefree seagull soars above the water, only to be suddenly swallowed by a shark.